Will the US dollar be overtaken by something called BRICS currency? I'm explaining the facts in this video, and the first thing I need to say is everyone needs to calm down. I know you're hearing about this on the internet a lot, but I want to share the facts with you in this video. If you don't have time to watch it right now, that's okay. Come back to it later. But if you're ready to deep dive in, here we go. First, what is BRICS? BRICS is an acronym. Originally, it was just BRIC, and it's a term that was coined more than 20 years ago by a Goldman Sachs economist as sort of a marketing ploy to describe countries which at the time were showing sustained rates of high economic growth. In 2001, BRIC stood for Brazil, Russia, India, and China, but as of 2010, BRIC became BRICS because South Africa joined. Today, BRICS has sort of grown from a marketing ploy into a cooperative, informal group of countries, like an alternative to the G7, which is the group of Western countries that the United States is a part of. Officially, BRICS says its main function is to promote peace, security, development, and cooperation. It also aims at contributing significantly to the development of humanity and establishing a more equitable and fair world. How? Political alignment and cultural values, which I'll talk about in a second, but also money. Let's start there. First, there's the BRICS banking part, which is important. In 2014, the BRICS nations launched the new development bank as an alternative to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. They also set up a mechanism to support members struggling with payments. Those banking and funding mechanisms are not only attractive to BRICS nations, but they're open to other developing and emerging economies that have had trouble dealing with the IMF and the World Bank in the past because those banks have policy conditions attached to their loans. So this is why you're hearing about countries that want to join BRICS banking. In 2021, Egypt, the UAE, and others took up small shares in the BRICS banking system. And recently, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Argentina have also expressed interest in possibly joining the BRICS banking system. And that brings me to the BRICS currency, the money. One Russian government official said a few weeks ago that BRICS member nations are working towards creating a new form of currency. He said the nations are still in the pitching ideas phase of all of this. The fact is, BRICS money, if it ever becomes a reality, is far from it. It's also important to note that even if BRICS nations come up with their own currency, BRICS is not a formal trading bloc, so to use this hypothetical BRICS currency, at least initially, they'd only be able to use it among the member nations that actually accept it as valid money. Like the euro is used between the 27-member European bloc, but the euro isn't accepted outside of those countries. Now, to understand why BRICS countries are trying to create their own currency, you have to understand the politics of all of it. Let's start with the basics. Two of the founding BRICS members, China and Russia, let's just say, not real big fans of the United States, and dare I say, enemies of the United States. The US is a democracy, and China and Russia are autocracies. Our political values don't line up, and our ways of life generally don't line up. And to the dismay of BRICS member nations, the US dollar has been the backbone of the world economy as the official reserve currency since 1944 because of our extremely strong economy, our democracy, and our transparent regulatory process, which has been a safe haven for global investors for years. The United States is the world leader because we have the largest economy with more than a $23 trillion GDP. Some experts say, yeah, the US has the world's biggest economy, but the dollar has an outsized influence in the world. The dollar is used in almost 90% of all international transactions. And fundamentally, BRICS nations don't think that's fair. They don't like playing by the US rules. They believe their combined 5-member nations' GDP of almost $25 trillion should outweigh the United States and its $23 trillion GDP. But if we're going to start combining GDPs, the combined GDP of the G7, which supports the dollar as the global currency, is $42 trillion, so almost double what BRICS brings in. Now, let's talk about whether this hypothetical BRICS currency could take over the US dollar as the world currency. Well, lots of international economic experts believe that would be a really, really heavy lift. Think about the GDP I just talked about and the fact that BRICS isn't a formal trading bloc. And if that's not enough for you, one of the founding members of BRICS, Russia, is under heavy sanctions by the United States, the European Union, the G7, and several United Nations member countries. Plus, there's a lot of infighting among BRICS member nations. For example, India and China have had lots of political differences for years and even have a disputed border. Russia and Brazil are considered stagnant economies, and South Africa's GDP is by far the smallest, not just among BRIC member nations, but also among the G7. Then there's China, which has its own global political ambitions that the other BRICS nations do not share and quite honestly can't compete with. The bottom line, could could the US currency fall in the coming years to a new global currency? Well, technically anything's possible. And yes, it's true, there are challengers right now to the US dollar as the world currency. Several countries have expressed interest in joining BRICS because they fear the United States would weaponize the dollar against them the way they believe the US has weaponized the dollar against Russia with all these sanctions. They think the US has too much power. But the chances of a large magnitude fall of the US dollar on a global scale remain highly unlikely in the near future. All that said, BRICS leaders will be meeting to pitch their ideas about this new BRICS currency at a summit in South Africa in August.